So hi everyone, my name is Evelyn Bettels and I'm in charge of consumer and market insights at L'Occitane en Provence.
Hi, my name is Karen Grunwald and I head up the Insights and Analytics department at Reckitt Hygiene UK.
Yeah, and my name is Dmitry Alexeyev and I'm a principal UX researcher at Signify.
So I think the first thing we would like to talk about is your attitude and usage of digital and face-to-face today. We all know the pandemic has created a discontinuity. We were all obliged to stop for a certain amount of time during lockdowns, certainly stopping the face-to-face. Some have gone back, others have not. I would like to understand, for example, from Karen, what she has been doing.
Sure, so I guess over the past 18 plus months now we're going on, it's been obviously a huge pivot for us towards digital. We had some big projects in the pipeline that we were doing that very much needed that face-to-face element that I think maybe other people experienced that we put on hold thinking in a few months' time we can pick them up again. And then in a few months' time we were like, okay, we need to find a solution to do this because we cannot hold off any longer indefinitely. So I guess it's very much a case of country by country, how consumers are feeling, how companies are feeling, what the government regulations are. At the moment, from a UK perspective, we very much still doing digital research. It's a bit of a consideration for us to when do we move to face-to-face, but I'm very much keen to start integrating that as an element. But obviously there's considerations we need to make as we make that transition. Especially, I mean, as a company, Reckitt, working on the hygiene side, where we're all about safety, protection of consumers, hygiene, etc. We want to make sure that we as a company do the right thing ethically at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn?
Yeah, it's the same for us. I mean, we shifted basically everything to online during the pandemic, mainly because of the fact that our key markets are in Asia, so Japan, China. We couldn't travel there anyway, so it was obvious for us to run all qualitative research online. We find pretty good partners, local partners where we could collaborate with that really kind of made up for this lack of being there in person. But what we also try to balance then is to keep the kind of human interaction of the more closer kind of exchanges. So we went more into the stores, into our boutiques to talk to our beauty consultants, for instance. So we tried to balance it a little bit, but clearly for consumer research it was mostly virtual. Yeah.
Dimitri?
Yeah, so I think in our case we've actually been cut off in the middle of the study when the quarantine started, particularly in Netherlands. We started with the home visits and then we had to finish online because we just couldn't anymore visit people's homes. So it was kind of a very interesting break point for us. But I must say we were able to sneak in some face-to-face studies anyway. And what I can say about it, of course, if you look at the pandemic, there were moments when we felt that it's gone, right? And so there's some rules were relaxed, and then we were able to actually run some lab studies. But then, of course, it became way more difficult for us to do because of all of the safety regulations, the fact that you cannot have participants one after another, that you have to take time, you have to clean everything in between the participants. So we were able to do it one or twice, one or two studies, but not on a larger scale. So as well as for others, a lot has moved to the online only. But in our case, with our products that impacts the environment, how do you test lighting online? It's very difficult. So.
Yeah, I understand. So, okay, crash program, tick the mark. Everybody reacted. This is typical of researchers, our flexibility. So that's fine. We adapt and we continue. However, now it's the time to think about: is the situation going to change? Is the situation staying the same? What is the future outlook? A lot of people yesterday also were talking about 2022, something like that. 2025. What's your outlook? How are you planning, to integrate? How do you split your future studies between face-to-face and digital? I would like to start with Evelyn, for example.
Okay, thank you. Well, I personally believe that there is a richness in face-to-face research that you cannot get through virtual. So both in terms of the insights you gather, but also the team building. Like, my stakeholders are mostly marketing, but sometimes also people who are in the R&D labs, and they're really far away from reality. So if I bring them into consumers' homes or go shopping with them, for them it's just so eye-opening, and it builds a team coherence between us, and then also sets the project up for success, because they've been able to exchange firsthand with the consumer. So I think in the future, what we will do, of course, we will have to be, smart about how we spend the budget. I mean, virtual has proven its qualities. It's definitely faster and cheaper for us. It doesn't require us always to travel around the world to do like a massive research. So we're gonna probably balance the needs for, when do we use virtual, when do we use face-to-face. But I definitely do not want to replace everything with virtual. That's not. I don't think that's going to answer our business needs.
Okay, thank you very much. What about Dimitri?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more similar for us. One of the things that actually we discovered during this past 2 years is that also in our studies we always try to bring the product management, the R&D into the kind of a context of the user, that them experience firsthand how are their products or their designs are actually working. But what we also find out in online studying is that suddenly, normally if you do a home visit, you maybe can bring one person, or two is the max. When you do online, we can have the whole team listening and looking at the conversation that you have with the consumer. So you lose the richness of the context of the environment of the consumer's home, but you kind of have more people at least having a taste of what real consumers think about your proposition or a product. So this is, I find, a really positive aspect. And another positive one, I think it already was mentioned also today, and that's something that we continue to use, is that last year we had to do a set of interviews with all the adults, so the people older than 70 years old. So if you think about it, 2 years ago, running this study online would be very difficult, simply because of digital literacy. And I think COVID kind of forced everyone to learn this technology, and now everyone is able to use it. So we were quite successfully run the study with all the adults, just online study, because I think for these especially vulnerable groups of people, I don't think we're going to back face-to-face soon enough. So I think it will continue for longer because of the vulnerability and the danger of COVID. But in terms of coming back to face-to-face, I think I will, at least from my side, I will try to push also our businesses to slowly introduce again home visits and so on, but maybe I probably won't be able to return to the scale that was before the pandemic, but we'll see.
And you see this so as a permanent feature? I'm guessing the impression that, you've discovered the advantages, which is absolutely fine. More inclusivity, especially the possibility of sharing the results with a wider audience. Yesterday we've seen putting together people from different parts of the world at the same time, which would be physically impossible. If you want to create a virtual discussion group with people from the US and Europe, you can do it during the day. It's enough to choose the right timing, and you can have a discussion which is not taking place in the physical world. So do you see that as something permanent? What's the feedback from your internal stakeholders?
Yeah, I think what actually did happen is that we simply replaced some of the user studies that we would do face-to-face with digital. And if you think that in terms of budget, I don't really feel such a big difference, to be honest, because in our case, digital studies require a lot of effort. So if we want to test some of our products, in the past, we would visit a person at home, we would help them to set it up because it's a rough prototype, we make sure that the safety is there, and then we leave and they use it for let's say, for a month. Now, we send it to them. So they have to do themselves everything, installation, setup, all of that needs to be done by the user. So in terms of preparation is way more intensive and requires way more time than before the COVID. So I think there is a balance between doing it in a context or just sending something to users and then letting them experience it and then share the experience with you. So the balance, I don't have an answer to the question. I don't know yet. As I said, I will try to come back to kind of what I feel is way more richer feedback that we can collect. But you never know, because from the business point of view, of course, I think the digital looks at least more attractive, at least in terms of. No.
And Karen, what's your point of view?
Yeah, so I think I'll build on that. I think a big thing for me going into sort of 2022 and beyond is going back to the core of the project that you're doing itself. What are the goals, objectives, and the key insights you're wanting to get out of that? And therefore, what's the best way to do it? Because I think in this past sort of 18 months, we've had to compromise. So I've been in situations where I've had to go to management team and stuff and say, it's not the best methodology, it's all that we can do at the moment. This is, the pros and cons, and this is the only thing that we have to do. Now, going into the new world, I want to make sure we go back to what are we trying to achieve? What's the best way to do that? And whether that be face-to-face and digital, let's do that. But obviously there is a cost perspective involved. So we've done studies. We had a similar study actually where we needed to get into consumers' home to install devices. We were not able to do that, so the cost of the study turned out to be pretty much the same, because we had to add extra elements of the researchers checking that they'd installed it properly, because we had huge drop-off rates. People didn't know how it worked, they didn't install it properly, we get missed readings. So there was a bit of a situation where you're like, oh great, we're going to get some cost savings. Yeah. No, we're not. But yeah, there has been studies too that we've realized actually they worked really well digitally. We got cost savings, we had the efficiency, like you say, in terms of time. But I think a big key watch out for me is over the time I've seen the drop-off rates in terms of engagement of internal people attending the research, because they don't have to travel, because they don't have to have that commitment. If a meeting goes in the diary over it, it's a nice to have. So that's what's a big...
The flip side of instantaneous availability and being online. I want to be insolent here. When you're budgeting, because this is almost the time of the year when you think about what your budget request for 2022 and beyond is going to be, do you wisely use a rule whereby face-to-face and digital don't have the same kind of price in terms of out-of-pocket money your company is going to spend? Or is there somebody from your internal stakeholder, I'm pretty sure you've bumped into someone who said, oh, by the way, you moved to digital, so it's going to cost a fraction of what it used to be before. So that's just a curiosity.
You want to start? Yeah, we are indeed starting the process of looking at 2022 budgets. Luckily, I have quite a fractious relationship with the finance person, where he always comes to me and he's like, I don't see any benefit out of doing research. You're not showing me any net revenue or gross margin or anything like that. So I always have to have a conversation with him anyway in terms of the benefit of research and why we do it. And it feeds into the pipeline. So as we go, it's a tricky one though, because we have headline of what we want to do in 2022. The reality is we have lots of ad hoc things that come up. So being able to have that foresight of what's to come and how we balance it from face-to-face and digital, we don't really have that. And from an engagement perspective, I don't think, at least my sort of stakeholders don't really realize the difference between the online and face-to-face in terms of cost perspective and things like that. So it will be a bit of an education in 2020.
Big advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar for us. I mean, we are organized. I spend a significant amount of time with every request, and basically we have different brand teams that may or may not be organized in squad teams. So you have a multifunctional team working on one, let's say, one category or one subline, and they would plan their priority for the year, and then they would sit down together with me and say, listen, we want to learn this and this and that, we want to activate this. So they work in sprints, they know already for the next 3 months what is going to be their priorities, and they have an outlook of the next 12 months. So, and then we have a proper conversation about, okay, so this I think you can answer with the quant, with the qual, and then they luckily so far still trust me in guiding them into the right direction, whether we can do or should do face-to-face or virtual. And to be honest, our budget is very small, so I have to apply kind of a smart technique of choosing one or the other. I don't say I'm always right, but I think coming back to her point is what you really want to get out of it is going to be key in terms of, you know, insights that bring us forward, but also, is there an underlying objective that you want to address? Like, for instance, has this team ever seen the real consumer? Do they need it in order to better collaborate and to produce new products or services that truly answer the need of our consumers? So this is something I also consider whether I decide on virtual or face-to-face. And yeah, I mean, for the outlook, it's going to require a lot of planning ahead, because jumping on what you were saying about the elderly target group, it's not that easy, and you're taking risks, right? So just recently we went to an old people's home near Paris, and it was a whole organization, obviously, because of COVID. We had to be vaccinated, tested, triple tested, whatever. The protocol had to be aligned up front. How many people are visiting? Why are they there? How long are we going to be able to talk to? How many individuals? Are we allowed to touch their hands, to give them a massage, and things like that? So it was like a huge organizational process up front, but it was so worth it, because I mean, it was so rich in terms of insights, and those are the people you don't reach online at all. I mean, those, you know, there were 75 plus in care homes, and yeah, it was really invaluable insights there. So again, you know, I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, I think in our case it's also kind of driven by this way how our organization is structured, and I'm a part of innovation, so we sort of separate from the businesses. We work with the businesses, we support them, but we have our separate funds and our separate budget. So when we get requests from the business, usually we have a bit of the power to decide ourselves in what way and how we want to run the study. However, as already mentioned, sometimes they have requests that are not planned. And in that case, where business needs to pay directly from the pocket, then it's a different conversation. Then, of course, you will have to argue if you want to do, let's say, face-to-face or home visits, because and usually I think in our case, it's not really about the cost, it's more about the time. Because if you think about like home visits, it usually takes longer than, for example, doing an online interviews. So in that respect, also the timing and kind of urgency of the study that we need to carry out is also plays a role. So, but again, as I said, the nature of our products make it very difficult to go fully digital. So and also most of the product managers realize that. So they understand that you can't test a new pixelated light source in online interview. The people need to see it. They need to see the effect. They need to see how it changes the environment in their home.
Okay, let me try to summarize here because I'm hearing kind of a cohesive story. So, okay, digital has become something which is going to stay for the foreseeable future. We've all discovered its advantages. You all seem to be very much aware of its limitations. It's not the same thing as face-to-face. Not very clear about this cost-saving thing of digital. Quite likely faster than traditional. And at least Dimitri was very adamant in saying, no, it takes a longer time. So, am I right if I summarize your point of view by saying that you actually don't have a preference about whether it's going to be digital or face-to-face? It really depends on the type of study, the objectives, the type of target, the geography. There's a number of KPIs that you need to factor in so that your recommendation will be, okay, we can do this under these conditions with these limitations and so on. So you're kind of a clarifier in terms of your internal stakeholders and teams, and it's not that face-to-face is become the premium, the luxury, the ideal thing. It's actually one option among others. This is, I mean, if anybody disagrees, please raise your hands and we can have a discussion. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that sums it up. And I think we're heading into a new phase now where, as a client, I would be looking to agency partners to almost guide me on that journey. So I expect there might be new methodologies that come out post-pandemic. I would expect when you have those conversations with agencies that they present you with different options, with different pros and cons of each and what you can get out of the study. So I very much, we go through the process internally of, we think this would be the right thing to do, but I always see the agency as the experts in terms of what methodologies are out there, what is best in terms of what we're trying to do, and going on that journey with us to make sure we get the best outcome based on what we're trying to do.
Excellent, right.
Can I just add another point? Yeah, I think it's funny, when I think back at a few years ago, I mean, of course, I would have loved to travel the world and meet consumers across, do face-to-face consumer. It's just not reality anymore, is it? I mean, we're all supposed to do more with less, so you have to be, applying different methodologies and just going and spending 2 weeks in some consumers' homes. I mean, I would love to do that again, but it's just, it's not possible. That's not reality today, at least not for me. So yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm looking towards the agencies to truly try to understand what I'm looking for and giving me then the option of, okay, I understand you're in this situation, you want to learn X, Y, and Z, and this is how much you have, basically, and here's the best solution to this. This is, yeah.
But I wonder, Evelyn, if let's say COVID disappears tomorrow,
yeah,
would you still then travel, or you say no?
Yeah, I would travel, of course, but probably more on specific elements, really.
Okay.
And to be fair, I mean, I don't know for you, but once that our finance team have seen that how much they can save, and
yeah,
for us not traveling,
indeed.
they're like, oh, are you really supposed to go there? So,
you're right. Especially when the finance team has a tendency to overestimate the cost of time that you spend, extra time that you have to spend.
Yeah.
Indeed, but I think in our case, one big shift that I see is that we still do field studies. It's just that we kind of left users on their own. We send them a package, they have to unpack it, they have to set it up. So what it also means is that we have to take a bit more risk in a way that we cannot really test properly in early prototypes. So we can only test the prototypes that are safe, CE approved. They can still prototype, but they are closer to the release. So already big chunk of investment into developing this is already done. And so then we kind of finally able to test it with real consumers. So that's essentially a risk. If at that stage they will tell us, oh no, come on, it's a garbage, it doesn't work. So then it means for us that, okay, that is a failure, And because we tested it a bit too late, then of course it also means the losses. So you have to take a bit more risks in this situation. Yeah, and I also agree with you, Evelyn, that probably it's not soon when we'll be able to come back and visit people's homes. Because say before the COVID, I used to visit like at least 50 to 60 homes every year. And it's very difficult to explain also to people who don't do it how much actually you get from it. So, and now it will be even tougher sell.
I think many of the people in the audience will understand how much you get to be in consumer shoes, either because you've done it as a client side or because you've done it as a supplier, so you know your consumers inside out. Last question: if a kind of a deprivation study, so if you had to, you could only use a face-to-face project once a year. It's become now we all hope that second half of 2022 maybe COVID will be something of the past, the populations will be vaccinated. I think this is a common expectation to go back to a normal life. However, let's make this hypothesis. COVID in one way or another tries to sneak back and succeeds. So we're back kind of stuck. And you only have one chance to make a face-to-face study. Give us some thoughts on what that study could be. Because, I'm a product fan. That's what I prefer doing, is studying a product, its sensory property. I'm a sensory scientist. How do you test a product digitally? I can hear Dimitri, because he's explained it very, very clearly in this morning's presentation, the importance of context and everything. I remember during the first lockdown, we joined spontaneously in groups of people trying to say, okay, which products can we ship at home safely? Okay, and the people manufacturing croissants in France said, nope, our products needs to be consumed in the maximum 4 hours after they get out of the oven. How do I get my croissants in 4 hours to the consumer so that he or she can taste it, feed it back? And there was one leader, and I'm not disclosing, don't ask me the name because I will not say it, but there's a leader in beauty care, a global leader in beauty care. First COVID lockdown, in the middle of a study, had to move online. Products were safe to be shipped because they could be stored ambient temperature, but they shipped 3 products. So the team within the client side said, we're not sure the people are going to be trying the right product in the right order, because the product were blind and coded. So the poor agency who done the field work ended up having to film every single respondent via Zoom, opening the product, showing the product code so that the client team could see, yes, that's the right product, it's supposed to be opening, and then showing the application of the product on the back of the hand as well. That took forever, because just imagine it was a quantitative like 300 times 3, that's 900 Zoom calls for the poor agency. So if you had to go back, yeah, but it was in the middle of the first lockdown, everybody was panicking. I mean, try to go back to over a year ago and, remember how you felt at the time when your government locally announced that you were going into, because everybody's gone into lockdown. There's not one place on earth. Maybe some little states, but in Europe it was generalized. So go back at that time, you got fields going on, and everybody says, no, stop. So what would that be? I'm very curious to know if you could only choose one type of project to do face-to-face. Let's start with Dimitri, who has already got the answer.
I think you will be surprised by my answer, because I would actually not do face-to-face for a specific product or specific product idea. If I would have a chance that someone tells me, okay, you can only do one face-to-face study every year, and that's it. I would actually try to argue for a generative type of study. So where I would do a contextual interview with our consumers without talking about any specific product, but more trying to understand maybe the change in the behavior, the change of the way how they use our products and so on. So to have, because sometimes we rarely do this type of studies, but usually you discover this kind of extra. Every time when you test the product in people's home, you always discover extra that is not related to the product, but related to the change in the behavior, the change of the kind of family dynamics, the way how people use their home. You always discover a little bit. And if you run a lot of studies, then these bits comes together, and then actually, usually what we do also at the end of the year, we present these insights that are not related to a very specific product, but related just to our consumers. So if this would be the limit for me, then that's the type of study that I would do. I would not focus on a specific product.
Okay, would that be, let me clarify, would that be kind of an ethnographic, observational study of how people...
It would be like kind of looking at the limitations and timing and budgeting. It would probably be more or like a contextual interview.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
I think from my side, I'm probably very much aligned. It wouldn't be a specific product or project. I think what I would look across is what have we got on the roadmap? Which element is essential that we have the reality of the immersion in consumers' lives, so they're real consumer behavior, and that element that you need face-to-face to be able to observe that, because sometimes through digital you don't get that real consumer behavior coming through because things get adapted, consumers don't do what you expect them to. So I would look at, which of those projects is it essential that we make sure that there's no questionable aspect that people can back to us and say, that's not representative of real consumer behavior. You missed that element. Because we had that with a project last year that we had to make work. And that was a huge challenge. So I think that would be my lens I put on it.
Excellent. Evelyn?
So I would choose our inspirational design target. So of the segmentations that we have in place, we choose her, and we spend a full wellness day with her. I pack a bunch of beauty products in my bag, and I go to her home, and then we just talk about beauty all day. Let's see how she applies products, what is great, what is not so great. Explaining the routine. So really, behavior. Ethnographics at home and about this category specific and this persona specific, but also see how it integrates into her life and how she eats, how she works out, if she does work out, and how she shares it with her friends. So everything will come together. But really, I think if I could spend the whole day with her, just pampering ourselves, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Oh, we've got plenty. Okay, let's start with this gentleman here.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. As a UX designer myself, it was great to see your inputs on research. I actually have two questions, if I'm allowed to. First is, did you experience any change in the behavioral insights when you shift from in-person to online? Because to me, a facial expression can go a long way. And do you also think that you can get better insights or more pure and more honest insights on person-to-person or online?
Okay.
I can go first. So the short answer is yes, I did notice that. I think we're, especially the obviously the body language is about 80% of our communication, right? So, and if you don't have this body language face to face, it's really hard to see over a screen. So you have to find a really good agency that kind of knows, how to set things up in the right way so that people open up to you. I usually also tend to do more one-to-one interviews, no more like online focus groups. I don't do that. I prefer either like maximum paired interviews or one individual ones to really go into that depth with one person. Surely I have less in terms of people, but it's much more insightful. And so I think the choice of your partner locally is super important, and asking, you know, truly thinking about the individual in front of you, like who are you as a person, and then asking these questions about her, and like treating her like a friend, or, you know, really trying to show interest into the persona. And I think that's bringing out the most, and kind of counterbalance this distance between the screens.
Maybe I could add just for a moment, because I think in our case what we noticed is that kind of the warm-up part of your discussion when you online is take longer, because when you visit people's home or they come to you, you just offer a coffee or a cookie or whatever, and in a few minutes they already starting to open up. And of course it depends on the topic that you discuss, and for some topics maybe online is actually a better approach. But in case of our products, which is lighting, there's nothing kind of controversial about that. So in that respect, online interviews are usually kind of, they have a slower start, let's put it that way, before you kind of start to feel, okay, I feel now that the person is starting to talk and then become a bit more excited about what they're describing to us. And usually at home, it's almost instant. In a few minutes, you're already on a track. So it requires more effort to prepare online interview compared to face-to-face interview, at least to our experience, to my experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Guys, full disclosure, I'm an ethnographer. I don't really believe in interviews as such. I don't think people are very good at answering questions. I think it's much easier and better to go and understand how products and brands fit into people's lives. That said, I was forced into a situation with Mars and the subsequent consulting that I do within Mars, that we have to go and interview people online. Right? We have literally no choice. And we've done it across markets, etc. And what I found was we couldn't be as lazy as we were when we were doing face-to-face. So it's no longer a case of just taking some great quotes, taking the kind of understanding that came through and sharing that or trying to make sense of it. Instead, what we had to do was focus on relationships, pain points, focus on much more around context. And then we got to a point where I would ask, I don't do them myself, but I listen in on the interviews. I would say to our research partners, just tell them, now you know what we're trying to get at. Here's our brief, guys. This is what we're trying to learn. What questions have we missed? What should we have asked you? What didn't we ask you? And a lot of it is actually about finding out what the real questions are that we need to ask, rather than questions we think we need to be asking. And what we found to our amazement, that 40% of the people we would put this to would, the instant reaction is to say, no, you've covered everything, because they want to get away, right? They want to finish it and go. But we'd say, no, take a minute, think about it. You're not allowed to give me an answer for a minute. 40% of them would come back with, you didn't ask me about X. Or, I think this is really important. If you're trying to understand this, if you're wanting to learn about that, this is what you should be doing. And that was quite revelatory. So, in a sense, I don't think that going online has taken away from being face-to-face. And I'm talking again as an ethnographer who does nothing but participant observation in people's homes, or did at one point. Instead, you focus on many, many more factors than you would have done before, which for me has been the last 3 years have been really a journey of discovery as well. And I can't honestly say that one is better than the other, or one takes away from the other. It's just my penny's worth.
And maybe just shortly to comment to you, we always ask also this question. We always try to ask participants, did we miss something? Do you think we should have asked you something else? And as well as in your case, we didn't apply this idea that if they don't answer, that we don't ask them. Maybe we should start doing it. is that kind of forcing them a little bit to think about it rather than immediately saying, no, guys, you asked everything. So, and in terms of the ethnography in the context and about what you said about lazy, is for in our case, the lazy part comes from the fact that when you're in a context, you see things around. You can use the cues to ask the questions. You could use the cues to bring up different topics. And online, you have to think about it up front because there won't be any cues to help you with your conversation. So that's just a comment on your.
Hi there, thanks for a great talk so far. Quick question on benefits of digital. Have any of you seen the benefits of technology like AI, sentiment analysis, and those sorts of things in a qualitative environment, addressing some of the concerns around body language that we discussed? And if so, do you see those coming into play in the real world as well?
Tough question.
No,
I haven't. So I don't really have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
No, I can't comment either. I'm keen to see it.
Yes.
You know, if it's, I think we've stuck to more standard methodologies. You know, one-to-one focus groups, things like that. We've done things like, you know, sending products to consumers' houses, watching them film themselves use products, things like that. But there is a gap, I think, that we need to explore as a company in terms of how do we bring that to life more in terms of bringing out the insights in a nice, easy way for us to be able to digest and not have to sit through some of the sort of providers that we have. You have to sit through hours and hours of footage and manually do that, which is not realistic. So there is a kind of disconnect that we need to address.
Yeah, I think in our case, because we have the connected product, so the nature of the product itself kind of also forces us to use also mathematical method and maybe not really machine learning, but statistics and a bit of the machine learning. And in our case, what we usually use it for is to essentially, let's say, try to identify kind of the cluster, classify our users, or to understand any specific patterns of use that are interesting for us maybe later on to ask during the face-to-face interview, for example. The same with when we test our products. Usually, in our case, we collect a lot of data, but if you're just a user of our system, it's not identifiable data, it's just aggregated data that we see. But if you're participating in a study, then we ask participants if they allowed us to actually look at their specific data. And then we use the data that we collected as an input for our conversation, because we could see, okay, look, we noticed that particular pattern. Could you say maybe a few words about that? So we do use it, and we're starting to use it more extensively. But there is not that many examples where we really combine like a qualitative with this kind of machine learning or AI type of techniques.
Other questions? Okay, thank you so much for sharing so honestly and openly your points of view. I think everybody has appreciated that.
Thank you.